the doors close, and I'm just in this elevator with Richard Gere going up. And I turn around to him and say, "Hey, Richard, my name is Richard Gore. So do people ever call you Richard Gore? Because people are always calling me Richard Gere." And here's the thing. We had to look like we were something. So with $400, we were able to get an address on Fifth Avenue between 56th and 57th, right across from Trump Tower. A temporary office service that allowed you to look like your office, but it wasn't your office. So you could use the address for a certain amount of money, and then you could rent the meeting rooms.
Right.
And so when you walked up to it, it looked like it had plush mahogany, right? It really did.
Your conference rooms.
That was my corporate office. So, and I got a call 3 days before the show saying that Elvis Costello saw the marquee and is refusing to go on.
Oh my God!
Because he's a vegetarian. And
didn't see that coming.
No, I never saw that coming. We just understood as a unit the power of celebrity, the power of entertainment. We understood how to leverage the power of entertainment for brands.
Right. Welcome to Bare Wires. I'm your host, Brian Heyman. And tonight we have a special guest, Richard Gore. Rich is an entrepreneur. He was in the entertainment business for years. He traveled through many facets, many domains of the entertainment business. And you'll hear the wild ride that he went on. And we'll try to do it in some kind of order without going off in a tangent, but that won't be easy. And, welcome to the podcast. I'm glad that we got you here.
It's great to be here. Let's go off on a tangent now.
Actually, I want to start.
Go any way you want.
I want to start with where you grew up, where you were born, where you grew up, because a lot of people I interview, I'd like to see where they actually came from and what formed their early life and how that projected them into the future.
No problem. I was born in a hospital in Brooklyn, New York, and I was raised in a housing project in Brooklyn. I was a NYCHA, also known as a NYCHA kid, which is New York City Housing Authority.
Okay.
And I always said being brought up in a project, especially specifically in a New York City housing project, is quite a trip. You learn things growing up that you take later, that you don't realize when you're going through them, that you're learning. But I would say growing up in the projects shaped me tremendously. I had a mom and dad who both worked, so I was a latchkey kid. So they both had jobs. They had to walk to the bus, take a bus, and then go to a train, and then take the train into the city. So I essentially went to school on my own early. They gave me the key around my neck, and because I lived near. I had the high school across the street from me, I had the junior high school across the street from me, and I had the elementary school 2 blocks down, and everybody kind of walked together.
So there was no buses, you just walk to school?
Just walk to school every day.
Cool.
And, with kids that would migrate from the projects, emigrate from the project down to the schools. So, but I didn't see my parents until late at night.
Wow. So that probably helped you with your independence and, eventually got to the point where you said to yourself, okay, I could do things on my own. I have been doing things on my own my whole life. And there's a lot of kids like that, it seems like a tough life, but it really builds a lot of independence in them, and they're able to do things without depending on their parents. These days, kids depend on their parents just for about everything.
I used to come home for lunch, man. I had to make my own lunch. I remember making chicken a la king out of a frozen packet when I was like 8 or 9. I don't know, I remember this. But I used to come home from school, boil the water, put the packet in, lay out the white bread, and that was my lunch.
So during going to school, and did you end up going to college?
I did. I went to Brooklyn College for the first 2 years. I played baseball, wanted to play baseball. It was also a less expensive college. So, okay. And it was kind of local. I still have to take a bus there, but it was the most logical place for me to go. And I went there for a couple of years, primarily to hang out. Telling you the truth, it had a big campus and had this one hall where a lot of the cool kids hung out without going to class.
Well, did you take classes that would lay the foundation for you?
I took classes I was majoring, if I remember correctly, I do remember correctly, I guess psychology.
Okay.
I was always interested in psychology. My brother's a psychologist. He's also 10 years older than me, so when he was going for his degree, he used to use me as bait, as guinea pig for his own stuff. So I got hip to it then. And then I kind of liked it, but really, I didn't really know where I was going. And then one day, I found out about the word marketing. I didn't know the word marketing.
Well, psychology is almost hand in glove with that.
It is, actually.
Ends up going by mistake going into the right field, because that as we get into, like right now, we're going to get into your first venture, which is crazy. But
it was crazy.
It was what, in the late '80s you started this?
It was. I didn't start it. It was I went to. I had graduated with what happened was, after Brooklyn College, I found the word marketing, and then looked up schools, and I transferred to Pace University, which was more expensive, but we worked my way through it. And I ended up going to Pace, and I was a lousy student in Brooklyn College. I'll be straight up on that. Once I got to Pace, I was all in on that. I was so focused. And
Pace in Westchester?
Pace University. Well, you know it in Westchester because you're up here in Rockland, but it has a main campus down by Wall Street, right by the Brooklyn Bridge, actually. So I would take the train, the subway every day from where I lived, and went there in downtown. And
so did you take marketing in that school?
I did. That's where I found marketing, and I was hooked. Once I understood marketing, and I just kept taking classes, and I had a teacher there who I remember who kind of like impressed me and mentored me a little bit, but I just got sucked in conceptually to it.
So how far after college did you start this business, your first business, which was what, EMG?
EMG I started
entertainment marketing.
My first job so I graduated with this marketing degree, and I had just gotten married. When I got married in 1980. I had met my wife in high school, et cetera, and we eventually got married in 1980, and then I needed a job right out of school, so I had to lie my way into a job with RCA, if you remember the company RCA.
Yeah.
As an assistant sales manager. I had no experience, but I got in.
Nice.
And I did that, which was basically selling warranties or extended warranties on TVs to people at night on the phone.
So what gave you the impetus, the idea to get into the branding marketing for entertainment?
Well, what happened was, I had no concept of ever being in the entertainment business. I had no connections. I come from a lower middle class family. But I met a guy at a party that somebody was throwing, and I was introduced to him, and he had this agency called Advertising and Movies. And I said, wait, what do you guys do? And he says, we're the agency that puts products in the hands of actors during a movie. We negotiate these deals. And the reason why companies do this is that nothing impacts the consumer more emotionally than entertainment. And I said, wow, I never learned that in school. And I was so blown away by this concept. And then I went, saw a couple movies, and said, of course, they're drinking Coke. That's got to be a deal, right?
I tell you, everybody has had that same thing. Why they use this car, why they use this, why they use that.
I knew none of that.
Right.
And this guy's talking to me at a party about it. And I love marketing, right? And I said, hold on, my mind was blown. So I said, I got to work for you, And, I have harassed, to tell you the truth, he was a really nice guy, and he had just started his company with him and his showgirl girlfriend. And unbeknownst to me also, there was a major film studio in Queens called Kaufman Astoria Studios where they shot major movies. I didn't know that either, because I just assumed all
it was in Hollywood.
It was in Hollywood.
Yeah.
There's a major motion picture that has history called Kaufman Astoria Studios. Well, that's where his office was. And, the guy left the party, he had given me his number, and I tortured him for like months because I was obsessed with getting a job with him. I told him I will do anything. And eventually he relented after about six months. I took a job for like $100 a week, and I was in. And the reason why that's important is the entertainment business, there's no ads for come work in the motion picture business. You have to get over this mythical wall. And one day I found myself over the mythical wall. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so it always seems to be that they're not willing to talk to anybody that's not in the business already.
Absolutely.
So there's kind of a catch between, okay, you're not in the business, you want to be in the business, how do I get in the business?
Correct.
So somebody has to do you a favor and say, listen, you're a slum over here, come on, you come work for me, and then all of a sudden you find yourself on the other side.
I was on this other side, and I think I was 27, and I just got married, and I couldn't believe, like, one of the first movies I worked on was this movie Power with Richard Gere and Gene Hackman. And one day I was going to the set because I was allowed to go on the sets of these movies, and I walked into an elevator at 6:30 in the morning near the UN, going onto the set, and Richard Gere was in there. It was just me and Richard Gere. And what's funny about this, people always called me Richard Gere because my name is Richard Gore, right?
Right.
So I'm walking at 6:30 in the morning, and I see Richard Gere, and the doors close, and I'm just in this elevator with Richard Gere going up. And I turn around to him and say, "Hey, Richard, my name is Richard Gore." So do people ever call you Richard Gore? Because people are always calling me Richard Gere. And broke the ice, and it was such a cool moment, and he was so cool about it. And then I saw Richard throughout the course of this, and I kept coming home to tell my wife, I'm hanging with Richard Gere. And of course, she didn't believe me. And I said, all right, I'm going to bring, she was 8 months or 7 months pregnant, and I brought her to this set. I said, I know you don't believe me, but I'm really hanging with Richard Gere. I was just so thrilled to tell her that.
So were you doing the products at that time? You were placing
Yeah, I was
products?
placing. So I was working for the company, and what we did is we put products in this movie Power. It was computers, as I remember it, and a sound system. And this, by virtue of those two products, I don't remember the name of the computer and the sound system, because they were in the movie, those companies ran with it to promote their own products to sell more. And then, I worked on the movie Wall Street with Michael Douglas, and
Wow.
and that was a trip because
Great movie.
well, by that time I moved up to New City after living in Brooklyn. We moved up to New City, and in Wall Street we had these Lotus cars. You know what a Lotus
Yeah.
is, right? And they gave me a Lotus to drive back and forth to the Hamptons because they needed the Lotus to be in this shot. So I was driving this Lotus car to New City condos and parking it outside. A red Lotus. I'll always remember. I was like the coolest kid on the block.
Was this when you were working for the company, or is this was when
This is when I was working for the guy.
Okay.
And
all right.
the reason I bring up Wall Street is one of the things I didn't mention is that the guy, though he was a nice guy, he had the showgirl girlfriend, and he got this business seduces you very much, and if you don't keep your eye on the ball, you get taken away into this other place. And what I mean by that is you get ego, you hang out with your star friends, and you start forgetting you have a business.
Right.
Which he started doing. And when he started doing that, I became the face of the business because he was too busy playing. So all the interactions between the brands, there was me and this intern, this guy. And he would just trust us. He entrusted us to do a lot of stuff. So since we became the face of it, we got a lot of stuff done. And on Wall Street, I had convinced the producers in Wall Street, Oliver Stone, the director, also to change a line in Wall Street.
What was it?
There was a line where they go into a bar where Martin Sheen and Charlie Sheen go into a bar, a shot in Queens, where he says, "Get the kid a Bud." And it says Budweiser. But we had Molson Beer as a client, right? And they wanted to promote Molson Light. But you don't say like Molson Light. This is
Right.
kind of...
Canadian beer, no
Canadian
less.
beer, right? But I convinced them. And I convinced the producer and Oliver Stone to change the line.
Wow.
And I was young. But it wasn't like because I was a wonderful guy. I gave them both computers, which they really wanted. That was part of the deal.
Right.
And now when you go to the movie, you hear him say, not only is the product shown throughout the movie, but he says, "Get the kid a Molson Light." And I always thought, wow, I did that.
Wow. I have to look for that when
man.
I watch
I
it.
got pictures of it. So what that did, the power of being able to do that personally and acknowledge that gave me the confidence. I said, I better leave and go do my own thing. Well,
Okay.
and we, me and the intern, who was a 25-year-old intern, Joe Allegro, one day walked in, and we had Subaru as a client, and they gave us cars. I had convinced the companies to go with me through this process. I said, I'm going to leave and go do my own thing.
So they left with you.
Well, there was never a guarantee because they were under contract. But I said, I'm going to start my own business. But what I did was I made sure I did this at Hollywood premieres with key people in those companies. So what we did is we would get invited to these really cool premieres. And at the premiere, one of the premieres of Wall Street, I had the two top executives, both from Molson, and I said, listen, I hate to break, I broke the news to them there when they were emotionally invested.
Okay.
And I did the same thing with Subaru, and I worked on the movie Big too. So
now you break into.
So I break in. We started. Here's how we did that. We didn't have any money, man. We were just two kids. We pulled together $400-$500, and here's the thing. We had to look like we were something. So with $400, we were able to get an address on Fifth Avenue between 56th and 57th, right across from Trump Tower. So we opened the company. We had all this stationery, and we were ready to say because we found a temporary office service that allowed you to look like your office, but it wasn't your office. So you could use the address for a certain amount of money, and then you could rent the meeting rooms.
Right.
And so when you walked up to it, it looked like it had plush mahogany, right? It really did.
Your conference rooms.
That was my corporate office. So for $400, we invited Molson up there about 2 weeks later, and they signed a $50,000 deal.
Wow.
Right out of the gate.
Wow,
and then
that's very
Subaru came
cool.
and signed another $50,000 deal.
So now you go to do you go to those movies and you present your products? Or?
Well, what you do is you do a couple things. Everything's built on relationships. This whole business. Now we're in New York. The movies are in L.A.
Right.
So I had a lot of friends in L.A., but we had to make a lot of trips to L.A. But we were able to create this persona of him and I being the cool kids from New York. And that persona, and I'm not overstating this, became our entry into meeting a lot of people in LA.
So you spent a lot of time in LA.
A lot of time, back and forth.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the process that, you have a certain amount of clients, Molson being one of them, Subaru being another that you mentioned. How do you approach somebody in a movie, say, okay, you're going to be using a car here, or you're going to have a beer at this point? Can you use this product? Or
Well, it goes like this. You get the script first. They send you, you gain trust from the studios and producers.
Right.
They send you the script once before it shoots. You read the script. You make notes on where it will go.
Where your products might fit?
Where it could go, yeah. And then you say, wow, we could go after this guy. Because we had to sell new deals too, right? So we would read a script, a new Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, and we would see, oh, wow, we could put something here. And then you call the company. This wasn't on the internet. We had to call people cold.
Right. I remember.
You remember those days? No internet, no cell phone.
No, everybody had to talk on the phone.
But the cool thing was, everybody you called, I had to get to vice presidents of marketing, and they didn't know me. But when I said, we want to put your product in a motion picture, everybody, you got to the person, whether it was a guy, and then there's a whole ego stroke to, like, how do you turn that down? I want to put your product in a movie. Now, telling them it's an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, right? That's coming out next year, and your product's going to be, it's hard for that decision maker to say, wow, that's not cool.
What is the financial transaction in that?
Oh, whatever we wanted it to be.
Really?
Yeah, it got really crazy. As I said,
if I have a beer, Molson, let's say, and you have a scene of 10 seconds where the guy's going to be sitting at the table with a couple of the guys in a Molson beer, what are we looking at?
Today or then? Because they're two different. That $50,000 that I mentioned that we got from Molson was for a retainer fee, but I could charge that $50,000 for a single
scene.
Single scene, and we did, and there was no get. The thing, it sounds all great. This sounds like, oh my God, how great these guys are. But it's so easy for the product not to be shown once the movie is shot.
They can cut it.
They could cut it. They could turn. We see bare wires here. It could end up looking like that with the camera, and it happens a lot, right? So
what is the person who gave you the money to do this to get in a movie say when that happens?
Well, you try not to let that happen. But what you also do to hedge your bet is that you go all the way. You get to know the entire crew, and there is a person that's a set decorator and a prop master who's a union guys. They're not the high level guys.
Right.
They're union guys. You got to get to know those people. So when they place the cup in the scene, that is facing the camera.
Wow.
So you have to really be clever.
So you have to know all the different levels, and
All
you have to be
different
able
levels.
to work with
and
all
they got to
those.
like you.
Yeah, and then you
And
got
they
to
gotta
work
like
with all those different
all of
levels.
them.
You know,
And sometimes the agendas clash because you may have like a Woody Allen who only just doesn't even see that, and he sees, oh my God, it's showing. I don't want it to show, and he turns it. Then you're stuck with a movie that doesn't show you.
there's nothing you can
And
do.
we've been there, and then.
So what's the conversation like? Let's just say that you got Molson,
Yeah.
you had it all set up,
Yeah.
and Woody Allen comes in, because you mentioned, but I don't know if you worked with him or not.
No, I do work with him.
He turns it, and all of a sudden you have to talk to the executive of Molson set,
great
and he
question.
calls you up and goes, hey man, what happened with that shot?
Well, hopefully I'll see the movie before them, and then I'll be disappointed in that movie. And then I call him, let's try it again.
Okay.
I mean, that's the best. We'll give you 2 for the price of 1.
Okay.
Then you hope.
I was wondering
And
why
then you hope. But the truth of the matter is, it's a very inexact science. And the reason that, and I'm glad you're asking this question, because that concept of it being an inexact science where you didn't control it all was also the impetus for stuff I got into later. It moved my career along. I stayed with that concept. It's
Okay.
like, someday I want to control everything.
Right. All right.
But
So,
this was-
so now when we see modern movies like today, and the brand names are like right in your face.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's a big business.
Really big business.
You get to the Mission Impossible and all these other movies.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, that's the car he's driving. Everybody wants that car. So this is in the beginning when it would be a Budweiser sitting on a table. It would be a coffee can sitting on the counter.
Yeah.
Guys making coffee or something like that.
Yeah, it's a lot of that.
But
dishwashing liquid.
Right.
We had Lever Brothers. I remember dishwashing liquid on the count. In Seinfeld, you'll see dishwashing.
Did you represent any car other than Subaru?
No, the Lotus, and then Subaru was our big client, and we took really. I mean, Subaru and Big, the movie Big, was a really big deal. Big was a big success for us.
Oh, cool.
There were a lot.
How many years did you do that?
I did that in my own company. We expanded it. I had a different view of the company. So what I did was we opened the company in January of 1988.
88, right.
While my wife was pregnant with the second kid, which obviously she was uptight about the risk. But we did that. But my goal was never just we called it Entertainment Marketing Group, but we wanted to leverage the power of entertainment in multiple genres. So movies was only part of the plan. We wanted to get into concert and tour sponsorship. And I got to know the top rock promoter. And again, relationships are everything.
Are you two, the original owners, still together at this point?
No, we're not together. We haven't been together since 2001.
So 2001, you split?
We split.
So what happened to the company,
All right, so Entertainment Marketing Group. Entertainment Marketing Group morphed from product placement to concert and tour sponsorship.
Okay. So you were together when you were doing that?
Yeah, no, we were together when we were doing that. And it also turned into the Celebrity Chef thing later. But we went to concert and tour sponsorship, so we work on really cool music tours as well as product placement, which made us the cool people to hang with, right?
Okay.
So we were able to convince people that, hey, look, there's bankers especially, that if we had an idea, we could sit down with our bank and say, we have this really good idea, and which we did in 1991. We decided to do a retail outlet because we would get on pop culture, because every event that we worked on, be it a rock concert or a movie, at the end of the concert, we always got stuff like merch.
Right.
They would give us really cool merch, and we said, wow, if we could bring that to consumers during key windows of time, that would be really cool. And we came up with this concept called Hot Properties, which was a music and movie merchandise store, which we sold the idea to Burger King. So Burger King, this all happened very fast. The Burger King VP, because Burger King was working on a concert series with us, they allowed us to try this music and movie merchandise store in Kansas. And they opened this, they had this really cool kiosk, and we flew Lurchin from the Addams Family, because the Addams Family movie was was opening to the opening of these things. And Lurch is like 7.5 feet. So walking him around Kansas City, we got a lot of press.
To go back though, when you're working with the concerts, so you were in charge of the promotions outside the concerts. Now they control it themselves. All these bands.
But we controlled the sponsorship and the rock promoters, who are the hardest people in the world to deal with. I mean, they are rough, really rough. So negotiating with a rock concert promoter like Ron Delsner, who you may know the name.
Yeah, I do.
I got to know Ron really well, but Ron was harsh. So we came to Ron and said, Ron, let us sell a sponsorship to this. We'll grab it. We'll take a third. And they say, I want you to take like 1%. And we would argue for the next 3 weeks and come to terms. And so we represented a certain show of his. And
so you would bring a sponsor as a collaboration with whatever concert tour they were doing.
Right.
Okay.
We did that.
So what kind of bands did you work with?
This band called the Rolling Stones. We did. We worked with.
I think I heard of them.
We did a Yope Jeans, Joop. I remember. There was some jean company called Yope Jeans. Meatloaf.
What'd you do with Meatloaf? What was the
they were part of the Burger King concert series. And my favorite story is we did a Burger King concert series at the Palladium, which had multiple bands. But one of the bands coming was Elvis Costello. And what was interesting about that is on a marquee, it said, Burger King presents Elvis Costello. And I got a call 3 days before the show saying that Elvis Costello saw the marquee and is refusing to go on.
Oh my God!
Because he's a vegetarian, and
didn't see that coming.
No, I never saw that coming. And boy, I remember that call like it was yesterday.
Boy,
they were flipping, and I said, "Yeah, but Burger King has the deal with you because now we got to take it off." And I just said, "Take it off, but we're going to turn it into a public relations story," which we did. We dropped a PR story on that, and that gave us more press.
Oh wow!
So we turned a negative into like more awareness for the entertainment marketing group.
So it was crazy. Were you selling merch, or were you just making collaborating deals with other
we weren't selling merch. We weren't selling merch. We were merely managing the sponsorship piece of the equation. All right. Ron and any other concert promoter around the country, and we worked with a lot of people around the country. They had the ultimate say. So, but we had to make sure that everything said whatever it said. Like Yope Jeans, I remember Yope Jeans with the Rolling Stones. This was a separate deal than the tour deal, but we still paid significant money. And part of the deal was you'd get an entertainment box, and then certain people had to come to the box and say hello to the crowd and manage. Remember, they had the company tied in had to see the benefit to make it worthwhile, which they always did because, we're saying we're going to give you a VIP box at the Rolling Stones concert. We had Bruce Willis show up at the box by chance. We looked like we were just lucky.
So they were getting some type of advertisement along with this?
Yeah, they were tied to the advertising, and then they were able to take it internally to do whatever they wanted to do. Wow. Like I remember Yope Jeans did an internal promotion to distributors.
Okay, so they had rights to the scenes?
Right.
Okay, wow.
Right.
So that gave them an insight.
Rolling Stones never got a dime from it.
Wow.
The local rock promoter talked his way around it.
They were cutting deals for themselves on the side.
Yeah, everybody was cutting deals, including us. We were cutting deals left and right because, we had amazing access. I just knew all these rock promoters. So if I wanted to go see a concert, I saw a concert on the stage. So all of a sudden we had all this access afforded to us, and between movies and music, right? And I just kept saying, we got to get into something where we control it all because we have this awareness about our company and we have this vibe. We got to max out even further. And the thing that got me nuts was not being able to control a lot of it, even on the concert rock, like the thing that I mentioned about Elvis Costello. We didn't control that, right? The rock promoter is going to blow it off because it doesn't want Elvis to walk, right? And it was that, the concept of product placement, which led me to think about things that we could control everything.
Yeah, it sounds to me to be somewhat complicated to monetize all that,
to
figure out how you're going to get your cut, where your cut's going to come from,
it's crazy.
And who's going to end up at the end of the day paying you for doing this work to putting these guys together.
It's crazy.
So that was like the Wild West too. I remember because I was going to those concerts at that time. It was just wild.
The thing with Miles Davis, which we did, and we got into once we did a deal with Hennessy Cognac to tie them to a jazz series of jazz greats. And I had read that...
Was that the Cool Jazz Fest at the time? Or was
it was called the Hennessy Jazz Series.
Okay.
And it ran for 4 years. And we approached Hennessy about doing this jazz series, and we would get all these acts, but all we were doing was tying to promoters around the country, putting their name on it.
Okay.
But I thought it would be really cool if I had read that Miles Davis does artwork, you know? And I said, wow, maybe I could call... This is like where my head was at. Not that I said, maybe I could call Miles Davis's people, and see if he'd be interested in doing the artwork for the series, you know, which I knew that we could turn into merch. And I had just read some little article on this. I just had the guts to pick up the phone. I mean, I thought it was a cool idea. And so did the manager. And so we met with Miles Davis to talk about how to do artwork, which I didn't even know what his art looked like. And I said, listen, we want you... Here's what we're thinking. We're doing this jazz series. Here's what we're thinking, Miles.
Because I know Miles Davis, right? Some history on Miles Davis, and I can't imagine sitting in the same room and go, hey, Miles, come on, we're thinking about you.
My partner and myself in this conference room, really having no clue, right? And I just remember this, and he's on the other side with his manager, and we're in this conference room, and we're saying, you know, it's going to be a jazz series featuring manager, and just, you know, run with it, see what you come up with. And he said, okay. And about 2 weeks later, brought back some art, and we sat. It wasn't exactly what we wanted. And we had to tell, like, I remember looking at my partner and saying, oh, we're going to freaking tell him that's not exactly what we want. So we said, it's not exactly what we want.
And he was cool about it.
He was cool about it. And he came back 2 weeks later. It was great. We loved it. Hennessy loved it. And then we had to do an event. We built an event in a gallery in Soho around it, where he would unveil the artwork, and we had all this press come to the. And we were like, I don't even know how old we were. It was probably in 1993.
So he was really like on his third phase of his career by that time in '93.
Yeah, but he's Miles Davis.
No, I know.
It
was, you know, he was been through much. He probably wasn't on heroin at the time, so. But he's a legend, and just to deal with him, and he has that persona of just being cool. You know?
I think the thing with celebrities, I learned really early, and I can't even tell you how I learned it. Just like the story I told you about Richard Gere, I just was never intimidated by celebrity, and I always knew they weren't going to be my best friends.
Right.
Like I knew I had a job to do, right? So, like I was in awe. I could give you stories about celebrities I hung with ad nauseum, but I knew at the end of the day, I had a business, right? So I was true to the work, right? So,
yeah, but I think to a certain extent, they wanted to feel normal too. These guys are held on a pedestal. They move around. Yeah. Everybody's doing this for them, that for them. Yeah. Sometimes, you know, I'm sure there's times when they, like in the elevator, where you say, "Hey, listen, how you doing?" and just have a conversation, and they're relieved. They're like, "Okay."
Oh, no, Richard Gere. There's a part 3 of that story. Is that 6 months after I had hung with him a little bit. Like hung with, not hung with during my day. Mary and I, my wife and I, were invited to an industry dinner at the Pierre Hotel with every A+ star in the planet. It was a benefit for the Museum of the Moving Image, and we'd be dancing, and there'd be Sean Connery dancing next to us, Kirk Douglas, and I'm standing there dancing with Mary. And Richard Gere had been at this, and I said, I'm not going up to Richard Gere at this event. But at the end of the event, I saw him at a table. I said, oh, he's with all these people. Maybe he'll remember me. I walked over with Mary, and he came around the table, and he gave me a big hug.
So really? Yeah, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah, it was cool.
So all of a sudden, your wife believed that you were hanging with Richard.
Well, she's it's been a roller coaster ride.
But you know, I think that these celebrities that, you know, they're put on a pedestal and away from a lot of people. So when they get to to interact with, you know, regular people, they feel good about it. They shouldn't be intimidated, and you shouldn't be intimidated.
Well, some are great, and as we get later once we get to the chef thing, it's a whole ball of wax. But
well, you know how temperamental chefs are.
Well, yeah, you would think Miles Davis would be temperamental, but no, we just understood as a unit the power of celebrity and the power of entertainment. We understood how to leverage the power of entertainment for brands,
right?
And we were the conduit to get that done. And so here we are. We had done music, we had done movies, and now we were looking for something to control.
soup to nuts.
Control it all.
Right.
Like, control it all. Own it all.
Right.
Own it all.
No negotiations. This is what we do.
Because we knew we were really good at selling sponsorship, and we knew we could almost do anything. But I had never produced my own event, like really big event. And this is the story. You ready?
Yep.
I played basketball twice a week, full court up here in Rockland for 25 years, right? I played it on Saturday and Monday nights. On a Saturday, after basketball, I came home, and my wife was watching these cooking shows on PBS. I literally walked in the door, plopped on the couch because I was done. I was really tired. And she's addicted to the TV watching.
What year was this? Because I'm probably up there playing basketball.
I'll tell you what year. I'll tell you exactly what year. It was June of, I could do it, June of 1995.
Okay.
30 years ago.
Right.
How about that? 30 years ago. And she was watching these cooking shows. I don't cook. She does. And she was watching a guy by the name Nick Stellino on a show called Cucina Amore. I knew nothing of this, but she was so in it. And I said to her, I said, wow, you're really in it. I said, what if I took that guy off of TV and brought him into an event? Would you pay to go see him? She goes, I'd pay blah, blah, blah. I'd love to see him. So the concept of a chef fan fest started like sinking into me, because here was this guy on, the key was she saw him on TV as this god, right? He's just on TV, but by virtue of him being on TV, she had this image of him. So I started watching other PBS people, and I started writing down the names of the production.
So these were all PBS public television?
All PBS.
Yeah, this is
before Food Network. And I remember, like, I would wait for the credits to roll, and I would write down the name of the production company. And I said, all right, maybe I could figure this out. So I figured out that we should try to do an event with 4 chefs and a host, where I could put 4 chefs in ballrooms at a hotel. This is just how my mind worked. And then we could charge like $35 or $40, and then we could sell sponsorship to that. And then maybe it'll work, you know? And
they would be in separate halls.
So the concept was that you would come and meet them. I was targeting it at an older person, because we must have been 40 at the time. Right. I'm trying to think of how old we were. You know, we weren't going to rock concerts as much as late. You know, we could create an afternoon event with the power of drawing. And so the concept would be, you'd go see the chef you'll love. We'd recreate the meal he cooked on stage so you could eat it.
Oh, wow.
And then we would have, this was all in my head. And so that was June of 95. And I remember saying, all right, I got it down, started playing with numbers. And I said, where are we going to do it? And I just picked East Brunswick, New Jersey, because I saw that there was this, just arbitrary. It was a Hilton in East Brunswick, New Jersey. We're going to book that place. Then I came into my staff, and I said, forget the concerts, forget the movies, we're going into chefs.
Everybody stood up and go,
everybody said, I'm out. half the company left. And I said, man, I think chefs are going to be the next rock stars. And then we found out about this company called TV Food Network. And it was almost like public access. And I said, oh, we could hit them up for $5,000, put a banner up. And so what we were able to do is we started creating this concept. I had contacted all these chefs and their managers and convinced them for $5,000. I remember I had to pay them each $5,000.
How did you pick the chefs?
Arbitrarily, by my wife. I said, who do you like? That's how I did it.
These were chefs that were already on TV?
They were already on TV. Unknown? They had shows on PBS.
Okay, got it.
And I asked my wife.
Okay, well.
I said, who do you like?
She gets some credit there.
Right, she gets all the credit. And she loved this guy, Nick. So I got this guy, Nick Stellino, a woman named Caprielle Pence, a woman named Natalie Dupree. And when we sold the $5,000 deal to TV Food Network, they wanted us to use this guy who nobody knew, named David Rosengarten. And then we booked Cousin Brucey as a host. And then,
very popular at the time.
Yeah, we booked him. And then, you know, the chefs started coming in. And November 5th, which is 2 days from today, was 30 years ago, we put on the show. What I didn't tell you is the show sold out in a month and a half on Ticketmaster.
Wow.
Sold out like 1,500 seats at $40.
Those were the undercover TV watchers of all these chef shows that you didn't know about.
Didn't know
in
they
everybody's
existed.
household. That's what they were watching at 4
Didn't
or 5.
know.
Right.
So I really had no clue. And we said, wait a second, they just sold out? And again, we didn't know how to produce a show. We were guessing everything. So we had to fly the chefs in. We had to set up an agenda. We had to cook their food, reproduce their food. and serve it out.
So would you have to bring a crew in to do that?
Well, I had a crew. My staff became a production staff, and we coordinated with the chef at the Hilton, which was a guy named Walter Leffler. I remember that name. He was the executive chef of the Hilton. We gave him the recipes of all the chefs. Then we flew the chefs in, and my wife was flipping out because she saw them live, and they were great guys and women. And then after the event, maybe we made it 20 grand, maybe, on that show. And we kept doing them. We did like 2 or 3 more.
You moved them around the country?
We did the first one here in East Brunswick, and then we moved it to Baltimore, and then we put it in Long Island, and then the fourth one we did was in Boston. And the CEO of the Food Network came with Robin Leach, because Robin Leach had a show on the Food Network at that time. And he agreed to be our host in Boston.
Wow.
So they pull up on a Sunday morning, and Robin's a really hard guy to deal with. And he came up, he was miserable because it was a Sunday, I remember, and he didn't want to be there, but he's with the CEO. And he was just miserable to deal with throughout that process. And we did a show, and I said to the CEO, as I said goodbye, jokingly, if you ever want to be partners, call me. And they called the next 2 days, and we formed a relationship.
So what was the name of that company?
Entertainment Marketing Group went from Entertainment Marketing Group to becoming a member of a new LLC.
Okay.
Called with Food Network, called Chef Events. Okay. So we called it Chef Events. They owned probably doing this from memory, like 55% or 60%.
Now, how long were you doing that? Because I know you got into this a particular show called 50 States and 50
that's
Restaurants.
later. Yeah.
Okay, that's later. So you're doing this for a while.
All right. So we go from this broke company, and we were broke, to having all the resources in the world. And luckily, when we formed this relationship with Food Network, there was a really good guy on the other side who helped me create a great deal, because we didn't know what we were doing.
Right.
But he took care of me. So we formed this insane deal.
How did you meet him?
When they said they wanted to become partners, they set us up with the mergers and acquisitions department of the parent company. And the guy on the other end of the phone was a great guy.
So he wasn't really he was looking out for your interest.
He did. Unbelievable.
Wow.
He was such a nice guy. He says, listen.
Those are the old days.
I said, wait a second. You could pay for my garage? Yeah. You could pay for my tolls? Yeah. You could, we had everything paid for, plus a salary, great salary.
Wow.
Plus we had ownership. I asked for the moon. They gave me an unlimited credit card. I could have bought. Nobody checked my T&E. I was living large.
So they must have been making some money on this thing.
Yeah, they did all right.
Yeah,
as did we.
Yeah.
And our whole life changed. That singular transaction changed everything, because what happened was, now we had Food Network, and the concept of Food Network was trying to build a brand. And they were leveraging the power of a live event experience, which is very, very powerful, which we were able to produce to the benefit of several agendas of the brand, including equity of the talent, because you really didn't know the talent then. So guys like Emerald was still starting to
Yeah, because you can't turn on the TV now without watching a cooking show.
We caught the wave
right
at exactly the right time.
Wow.
And then everything happened after that. Once we were bought once we were with the Food Network, that 1,500 person event, which we were proud of, became a 7,000 person event. And we grew like crazy. And it ran for 5 years.
It's amazing what people are interested in. You never know it, because it's really not something that you were interested in.
I was nothing. I don't cook.
I know.
My wife
Thank
cooks.
God for your wife watching
that.
Yeah,
my God.
Thank God she was watching that show.
It's like, thank God. And it's literally true. It changed our lives because everything sounded really cool before. This changed everything because.
Well, I'm sure all the stuff that you've already experienced was the foundation to go. The
foundation was you had to be liked by people. Like when you transact, everything was people. The transaction was always people buying into what you were saying, right?
Right.
And then you'd have to produce
because they were always taking a chance.
They're taking a chance.
They don't see the product until it's done.
You're selling air,
right?
We sold air our whole life, but. You had to produce, and you could have sold air and not produced and lose them.
And done. You would have done, though.
But we were able to produce the results, right? So that kept us in the game for a long time.
Yeah.
And it was quite a ride. And we ended up producing 3 TV shows from that.
Wow. What were the TV shows?
First, I convinced the Food Network that we wanted to do an event in Hawaii. And I always loved Hawaii when I was a kid, like in the projects. I want to go to Hawaii. And I convinced them not only to do this event in Hawaii, but to allow me to help produce a show from the event in Hawaii called Cooking Across. It was original name of the event was called Cooking Across America. And we called the tour Cooking Across America. And we went to 25 cities around the country. But we wanted to go to Honolulu. And when we were doing the Honolulu show, I convinced them that it would be good TV. So I did a 1 hour special called Cooking Across America Hawaiian Style, which is, I'll send it to you.
Was that the first time you went to Hawaii?
I had been to Hawaii with my wife by luck about 10 years earlier. But this was going to Hawaii, and we were such a big deal in Hawaii. Like, it was the coolest.
Wow.
Like, everything opened up to us.
Wow.
And, every chef wanted us to come into the restaurants and
do a little stick for them, or?
No, they just wanted us to show up. And, the world, we would walk in, they would serve us everything and every drink under the sun, give us food, because they wanted us to appreciate them.
Okay.
Because if you remember, and I know you're going to remember, there was a point where no one cared about chefs.
Right.
It all turned. The chefs the kids who went to culinary school didn't cut it in academic, right?
Yeah.
So you never really cared about a chef. And then one day at some point, and I'll say this point being around 1998, it all changed. And it crossed over, and then chefs really became something else. So everybody wanted to go to culinary school after that.
So what do you think? What do you think changed? That's a great
all
point.
of this, the fact that Food Network exists.
No, I know, but what do you think changed in the psyche of the mind? Why it became so important when it wasn't that important? It was a job.
TV?
When you were a chef, you were in the kitchen.
I'll say it without a doubt. TV, without a question. Because as powerful as those chefs were from PBS, they weren't mainstream. Once word got out that there was a 24-hour 24-hour network solely dedicated to food, that became a buzz. And then it became a story. And then the stories kept morphing onto other stories. We were building crowds wherever we went, and they were rabid crowds. These people...
I'm like you. I don't cook, so
so
for me to make sense of it, it's
hard
very difficult to get that
I'll make
excited.
sense of this. I have a brother-in-law who watched the Food Network religiously and never even picked up a spoon, but he watches it for entertainment. And then I started thinking about that. I said, wow, I think half the people who come to our events don't even cook. And It's true. They just watch it as an entertainment art form.
Wow.
And they were addicted. And these stars, there's groupies and there's everything that comes with it, man. It's crazy
amazing.
stuff. And it all exploded. And we had a host named Bill Boggs. I don't know if you know Bill Boggs from Bill Boggs, Midday with Bill Boggs in the 80s.
Oh, yeah.
He's a great guy.
Yep.
He became a
TV host.
Big TV host.
Yeah.
He became our host also, and he had a line which he said around the year 2000. He says, we're like a Grateful Dead concert, only we're smoking sausages in the parking lot. That was his line.
So people followed you wherever you went.
Oh, yeah, it was crazy.
Because I remember that group. The Grateful Dead. There was a Grateful Dead group. There was probably, I would say, a couple thousand that would travel, literally leave school. I mean, I knew guys and girls that, I went to school with, and we wouldn't see them for like 3 months. And we were just traveling around with the Dead. I'm like, okay, and did you do anything in this semester? No, we'll do it next semester. But they would travel, go to every city the Dead was at. And then there was, another group of, maybe another 1,000 that would go to that show only, and that maybe another show close by. But there was people that just traveled throughout the country. Now, they wouldn't just go into New York. They'd go out to California. They'd go wherever they went. They were following them. I don't even know if they remember any of the shows, frankly, by the time they got actually playing. But I've been to a number of Dead shows, and it was a phenomenon the way it went.
I was never a Grateful Dead guy, but I'm a big music guy. I was at Live Aid, and I thought Live Aid was the bomb. But I've been to a gazillion concerts, so I know what you're talking about. I remember in our Cincinnati show, I remember this like it was yesterday, there was a woman who came to the show alone, traveled 6 hours in a car to see one chef.
Wow.
That she saw on TV. She was willing to get in a car.
Did she do acid on the way?
She got drunk pretty quick, but I'll always remember. I remember her name was Tammy Jo something. But I remember talking to her because I remember the Cincinnati press covered the story. I said, "You traveled 6 hours to come see this?"
Sober? No,
Like,
so
it's
because
crazy.
Because the Dead concert, you'd walk around before the concert. It was like the Living Dead. You weren't sure.
Oh, you know, we had alcohol at our.
We would. I'd walk around and go, man, these people are so far gone. But they had all drifted into the concert, and you know, the Dead, they would play for 25, 30 minutes, one tune, like just keep playing and playing guitars, and they would be in their own world doing their thing. It was a very different crowd. I went to a lot of concerts. I went to.
As did I.
I went to, you know, just about everybody. Climax Blues Band. I don't remember. You know, I was down in the Capitol. I used to go to concerts all the time. I still do, actually.
Yeah.
But the Dead, by far, was the most.
Well, you know, and you have those
weird experience.
You have those level of chefs. There's a guy named Guy Fieri now.
Yeah.
Who's at that level, and. You know, when I left the Food Network, I got to work with Guy, and I had the greatest Guy story. I left. What happened was, I got to know Guy really well before he hit and after he hit, and he's actually one of my favorite chefs of all time because of the significance of our relationship. But I left. What happened was, the sad story is that while we were at the Food Network, kicking it, becoming this crazy nutty tour, we had gone through 4 presidents. The 4th president came on. And unbeknownst to me, wanted to focus on programming, not live events. And this had become a subsidiary that was rocking. What we didn't realize, we sold our own sponsorship. And as you remember in the early part of the conversation, you know we're good at selling sponsorship.
Right. That was hand in glove what you did.
And that was still our asset. And what we didn't know is, they have ad sales that try to sell ad sales.
A whole department that did it.
But we as a tour were kicking it. And like I remember selling $1 million title sponsorship to one of our years in front of the Bellagio fountains because we were tied to Heinz. And she asked me, well, what do you want to do? How much you want to charge next year? I said, $1 million. And it just went like that. She goes, okay. The power of live events, it turns, if everybody could sell at a live event, they'd make $1 million. Because everybody, decision makers who go to these live events are so invested in the emotion of it. It's so powerful when especially you're saying you're a sponsor of a successful event. And what happened was with Food Network, there were many people worked, and there were many agendas at Food Network. Our agenda was very laser focused. But in the ad sales, people were getting their ass kicked by us. And somebody complained to somebody that we were cannibalizing them, which we weren't, but made the case to the president that we were. And then one day in 2001, I was called into the president's office with my partner, which was no strange thing. And they said, we're cutting the tour. I said, what do you mean they're cutting the tour? Like in 2 weeks? I mean, in 2 years? He goes, no, in 2 weeks.
Wow.
And it was the ultimate cold water thing. So yeah, we were rocking. You could be too good at sometimes.
Well, you probably scared them. You went into their territory. They probably...
It was a wee thing, but what I learned, and this is, you know, you could take this, you know, here I am looking back, and I've known this for a long time. There are many, as I've told my daughters, company is not your family.
Right.
It's never your family. You could say it's a family, but it's never a family. And what you have to be mindful of is everybody's personal agenda, not necessarily business agenda. And you have to you got to keep that in focus. And if we knew that people were starting to resent us because of our success, we would have evolved that a little bit differently. But we weren't hip. We didn't realize that was happening, and it was happening. And they were in the ear of the president. And the president cut the tour, and you know, we went to lawyers and got a good out for myself and Joe. And then but it was really cold. It was cut in the middle of the tour.
Wow. Did that stop all the tours are they still doing food tours?
No. Because they don't have the expertise. What they do, they do another thing. They put their name on it, and they pay heavily for it. They do something called the South Beach Food and Wine Festival, which is in Miami.
Okay.
And then what could have been them owning a thing like us, they now pay for that privilege.
Wow.
Ridiculous money, probably $2-3 million.
Wow.
I guess, versus taking the asset and leveraging the asset and making money from it while it's marketing it.
Right, and using sponsorships.
But this woman didn't understand it. And there's a quote from the former president, which I keep in gold. And she wrote, there would be no Food Network if there was no chef events, and I'm very proud of that.
That's cool. I mean, it's a wild, because I don't, like you, my wife cooks, so I do go out a lot. I do go to a lot of restaurants. I am particular about what I eat. But I never found myself staring at the TV and watching a guy cook something.
It's amazing.
And it is amazing. Thousands of people actually do that.
We had,
But there's probably there's probably a lot of people who don't watch sports like I watch sports.
And
either.
I watch sports.
So
I don't watch Netflix. I watch sports.
Right.
So,
I'm the same way. So.
But pop culture, we really got to understand pop culture and the power of pop culture, and we've been very fortunate to live in it. And then I left. Joe and I broke up, so we left the Food Network. We had an out. If you want me to go,
I'd like to. I want to hear.
All right. So what happened was, what I did. This is a great story. I'm downstairs having lunch at a deli around the corner from the Food Network, and I'm sitting there with one of the CFO's executive assistants, and then I see the attorney for the corporation alone in the place. I invite him to sit down. We have this meeting, we have this lunch, and then I say I have to go to a meeting at 2:00, and he says he has to go to a meeting at 2:00. So when we walked in that meeting, I actually had lunch with the guy who was going to tell me we were terminated.
Wow!
He didn't say a word. So this is a wild story. So we shook his hand. I said, "Oh, I got a 2:00 meeting." Oh, yeah, he's got a 2:00 meeting. He left. We both left, and Joe and I walk into this meeting with the president, and there he is with the human resources person. And they told us they had this document prepared. They said, listen, we're shutting down Food Network, but we're taking care of you. I was shocked. I was blown away. Like I never saw this coming.
Wow.
And like everything I'd built with Joe was like right there in that moment going away.
And it was just with the stroke of a pen.
Well, they had the document. Yeah, there was no hint that this was coming. And so I took the document. And I remember looking at the document they gave me, right? And it was a legal document on our out. And I didn't see the words. And I just kept going like this. And I threw it back at the lawyer. I said, it's not going to work. I said, you'll have to talk to my lawyer. I didn't even know what it said. And then the lawyers got involved. And then Joe and I got a good out. And,
really?
And then but we couldn't compete for 2 years.
Oh, they gave you a non-compete.
A non-compete for 2 years, and I knew
in the field at all.
In the field at all, which of course I was not going to adhere to.
Okay, did you test that non-compete?
Yes, I did.
I figured you did.
I did. I tested it pretty quick, like.
I guess you did. I've been in a number of businesses that I've owned, and I've actually been under a non-compete, to tell you the truth, and. What I found out with non-competes, they're about worth as much as the paper they're written on, because when you sit down in front of a judge looks at it a little differently than the business people. He says, you mean to tell me you're not going to allow this person to make a living in something that he does every day? I don't think that's going to fly. And, actually, my son owns a business too, and he's going through this right now. Guy did some stuff in his business, and he had a non-compete, and I had to break the news to him that, it's nice that you had to non-compete, but I doubt it will hold up in court, because that's just the way it is. Some of them that are very particular and very specified in certain fields will hold up. But when you talk about general business, especially sales along those lines, or something that you've done for a number of years and somebody tells you can't do it anymore for whatever reason, a lot of times they won't hold up in court. That's what I found.
Well, the other side of it, whether it holds up in court or not, you still have to fight it and spend the money to fight it, which kills you. That's true. So with this one, about a month out, they were paying us out for 18 months, so every month we got money from them. Month number 2 of 18, we were summoned by one of the largest entertainment companies to go talk to them about building a culinary thing. A company called IMG, very famous, very big company. They called us and they flew us out to Cleveland. And I said, all right, let's just go. We'll talk to their executives. They flew us out there. We had a special dinner with their key executives in their executive dining room. It was really cool. And they were like wooing us to build a culinary entertainment business. And I was tripping over this. This is freaking great. And so we talked about it. We presented what we saw as a vision. And I went back to New York, and 2 days later, I got an email from the general counsel of Food Network, who knew that we went.
Right.
And flipped me out.
Small.
I don't even know how, but
Small group. It's everybody knows what everybody.
somebody knew somebody, and it happened that quick.
So did they back away from doing it?
I begged, begged forgiveness.
I'll tell you my non-compete story. I owned an environmental company. I was one owner of 4 guys that own an environmental company. And we disagreed about the direction of the environmental company. And a public company came in. And we said, okay, we're going to sell to the public company. We've been doing this for a while. And they gave us these non-compete agreements, all of us, all 4 of us. And, 3-year, we're going to pay you this and blah, blah, blah. So I had never really worked for anybody. In college, I worked for guys. But, it's pretty much out of college, I started a business, and I was working for myself all my life. So
Right.
I really didn't take to working for someone. And for some reason, it just didn't sit right with me. So, I could tell you how I got into the business. But more importantly, I just said to myself, after about 3 months, I said, I can't do this. And my brother was owner of the company too. He goes, what do you mean you can't do this? They're paying you good money. Mm-hmm. You're really not working as hard as you did last. I said, I can't do it. I said, I don't know what it is. I just can't do it. He goes, you're nuts. I said, I guess. So I went to them and I said, listen, I'm leaving. And they freaked out.
Wow.
They do. What do you mean you're leaving? Wow. We're paying you good, blah, blah, blah. I said, I can't do this. And they go, well, can't do what? I said, I can't work for somebody. And so they said, you got to non-compete. I said, yeah, I know I got to non-compete. Because they knew I had great relationships with customers.
Right.
These people were my friends. I was going to their weddings. They were coming to, we were going out to dinner, blah, blah, blah. I says, I have no intention of contacting any of them. They're my friends. I'll speak to them, but I'm not going to talk to them about business. So I went in a total different business, right?
Wow.
I went into the commercial cleaning business, which I could tell you why, but I went into that business and they were like shocked because I had done this. I was a pioneer in asbestos because I had done it in another state. It came to New York. I was considered an expert in the business.
Wow.
So I worked for hundreds of school districts
That's
that had to
very cool.
right? So they knew that I was like, this guy that people would go to, considered an expert in the field. And I said, no, I'm not going to do it anymore. And they just couldn't believe that I would walk away from this because there was a ton of money in it, right?
Yeah, right.
But I had enough of it, and I walked away, and I started another business. Wouldn't you know it? 2 years later, that public company went out of business. I had like 10 guys call me from the company, go, come on, let's go back, back. And I did. I did go back into it. I dabbled in it. But the luster was lost. The margins had dropped to, they weren't worth me getting back into the business. When I got first into the business, the margins were so high, I was making a ton of money. But the margins had dropped. Everybody got into business. It became a big deal. And I said, we did it for a couple of years. I said, really, I just want to focus on the business that I'm doing, and I did it. But that's my non-compete. They were dead sure that I was going to go back into the business, and I had no intention. I was going in a completely different direction.
I didn't get into. I had this belief that you had to stay relevant. I truly believe. I learned that from entertainment. If people left a job, no matter how great the job they had was, and everybody kissed their butt. Once they left that business and went into another business, no one cared about them.
No, it's just how it is.
So that was my attitude. I said, man, if I don't stay in this business, no one will care about me. And I
did it for other reasons.
Yeah.
In business, there's a lot of different businesses, and I'm going to hold a business forum with a bunch of young guys.
Oh, yeah, really? That's cool. I'll
started a business. They're going to do a podcast, and then we're going to hold a forum.
That's great.
But a real quick story. I was doing environmental work for a guy. I went into his building.
Right.
I was talking to him. My guys were working outside. I was talking to him. He's a beautiful suit. He had his feet up on the desk, and I was saying, and I just couldn't figure out what this guy did. He owned the building. So I said, oh, fuck it, I'm here. I was asking.
Right.
I said, well, what do you do? He goes, I own a commercial cleaning business. And I said, commercial cleaning business? He goes, yeah. I said, wow, you must do very well. He goes, yeah, I do about $60 million a year.
Holy moly.
And I almost fell. I'm looking at the guy. I almost fell over, right? So I said, I don't give a shit at this point. I'm not leaving this office until I find out how this guy made this money, right? So I sat down, and he's looking at me, and I said, tell me how that works. What he told me was the business is not a glorious business. I don't go to cocktail parties and tell people about what I'm doing. People don't give a shit.
Right.
He goes, but what's good about this business is I get a job, maybe $60,000 a month. I'm doing a couple office buildings for this company. I don't have to go sell that again. I will get paid every month for that job as long as I do it. And he goes, it's residual income. He goes, so I don't have to spend, that's why you see me here with my feet up on it. I don't have to run out and sell a job as soon as I'm done with the job. No matter how big the job is, it's going to end. He goes, my job's just keep clicking along, as long as I can do it. I got to be honest with you. At that point, I walked out of that office, I said, this is the business to be in. So when I left the environmental business, I knew what I was going to do, but I didn't tell anybody.
Cool.
But and what I tell guys now that I work with, and I work with a lot of young guys in business, I said, figure how you can get monthlies. Figure how you can get a residual income constantly coming in, because going out and selling your services or your product, it's hard.
It's
like when you
really hard. It's
when you
really
do a
hard.
show, the show ends, and you say to yourself, "Okay, I got to sell another one." But for this guy,
it's
and
really
I can't even remember his name. I'm sorry, I can't remember his name. But this guy's he was very open with me for some reason. He just said, "Listen, this is how it works." And he had two guys, and the whole building was rented out.
Right.
He had one office with two guys, and all they did is look at numbers on jobs and figure out how to do the job.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because I can't tell you how difficult this process is, because you just heard that now I'm going from Food Network, right? So Joe, I have to start up again. It's me. I don't have the resources. It's me. And I meet with Joe, my partner. And by the way, Joe and I as partners were great partners. I love the guy. We met on September 9th, 2001. I remember it well. And we talked about, I said, listen, I'm going in, even though there's a non-compete. I'm going to go do my thing. Come on. He didn't want to risk the non-compete, which I respected. So I decided to open a company called Culinary Entertainment Group and go do it. And he didn't. So we parted ways amicably.
Right.
And then September 11th happens, the 2 days after I make that decision. And then, wow, that was rough. So it was a rough year and a half. Then I had to get on the phone and beg for business,
Just start over again.
Which I did. I called Simon Malls, cold.
Very familiar with them.
Simon Malls out of Indianapolis, largest mall company in America. I had decided in my head I could build a culinary entertainment I could use celebrity chefs to attract audience and hold audience to a mall that was trying to attract shoppers and get them. So my rap was, I called cold and I got to a head of marketing. I don't remember the rap. I didn't know this person. I remember the woman's name too. But anyway, and I said, listen, I promise you that I could attract more people to your mall. This is what I said to you. And they're a multi-gazillion-dollar company. I said, little old me could attract more people to your mall on a weekend. I could hold them longer. I could induce them to buy more, because while the chefs are on there, I can induce them to buy. And you'll get press. That'll be worth way more than you pay me. That was my rap. And they bought in. It took me about 5 months to sell it. And all of a sudden, we called the tour Simon Super Chefs Live, and for the next 5 years, Simon paid me stupid money to do that tour.
To do that in the malls.
And by the way, just so you know, they are the most difficult company I've ever worked with. So all those things I told them, they researched every time. So I was under the gun every time.
Yeah, well,
and that's
why they're pretty successful. They're
rough. They're hardcore.
They're a hardcore company, and they're probably reevaluating a lot of stuff right now.
But not
Amazon.
back then.
No, not
there was no Amazon back then.
I know.
There was none of that.
They didn't see that coming.
But I was really proud of that tour, and that's where I met Fieri. And the story about Fieri, if you know who Guy Fieri is, it's a great story. So I'm the 5th year of that tour, and that tour is going to 25 cities a year, 25 malls a year. We go in and make a big deal, get tons of press with celebrity chefs.
Would you do food that's relevant to that area?
Sometimes we did. We tied in chefs from that area, and we flew in. We had our own host, and we flew in a celebrity chef from Food Network. By that time, Food Network was rocking.
Right.
And we had a stage, a $200,000 stage. It was a really big-ass stage, 2 tractor trailers. And this was little old me running this company, and we ran around. So we did these mall tours, and we didn't charge. We didn't have to worry about tickets, because all they cared about was who we attracted. So it was great. They paid us. I didn't have to worry about ticketing.
They probably did an average, say, well, this person comes in and they're going to spend X number of dollars.
Yeah, which they did. It was a really success. And needless to say, when we went to Indianapolis, which where they were, the higher-ups thought we were God's gift to the world. And they treated us like that. But they were really hard to work with. So on the tour, we were going through the town of Santa Rosa in California, which is near Napa. And we're bringing a celebrity chef named Sarah Malton. And about 3-4 weeks out from that event. And we're tied into, like when I promoted an event, I went ballistic. We tied into radio stations, TV. You had to be dead not to know we were coming to town. And this guy, I remember leaving the office in the city, driving up the West Side Highway around 6:30 at night. And I get a call on my cell phone from this guy who says that he's a local chef there and he wants to open the show. He wants to be the opening act. And I said, who are you? How'd you get my number? And he said, he got my number from the radio station. I said, what balls do you have calling me? And there he was on the phone working me to put him on the show as an opening act. And the guy's name was Guy Fieri.
Wow.
And he says, I'm going to be really big. I said, I don't even know who you are. And then he just talked me into it. Like, by the time I got over the GW Bridge, he had talked me into it. I said, fine, you'll open. And he was an unknown guy.
That was his hometown?
His hometown was Santa Rosa.
Okay.
He had 2 restaurants in Santa Rosa, just a restaurant chef.
I kind of know the story about him. He really just started in the restaurant business.
Yeah, and I met him when I flew out there. I didn't know him. He invited me to his restaurant, and we sat there, and he was a character, man. And we bonded like that. We clicked like that.
Wow.
And again, he had won the next Food Network star on Food Network the year before. But he had started making a little bit of a move. And then I said, fine, you could do the show. And then at the same time, he crossed over, became more popular, and we became really good friends after that show. We just clicked. And then I put him on 5 shows the following year as a headliner. And then he just rocketed into the Ozones.
Yeah,
and,
he's doing very well.
He's
for
beyond
himself.
doing well.
Yeah.
He's just in this other place.
Right.
But he's been loyal. He doesn't need me at all. But a few years ago, he got a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame 5 years ago, and he called me and he invited me and Mary and I out to be his guests for the weekend. And we went to the ceremony for him getting a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, of which Matthew McConaughey is the guy who's the MC.
Wow.
Giving him that. This is a chef who called me unknown, right? So years later, he's there, and then we go to his party at Close Streets down in Hollywood. He had what I thought was a foreigner cover band playing the music, but it ends up being Foreigner who was actually playing it.
He
so
seems
everything
like a
changed.
good guy. He seems
He's
like
a phenomenal guy.
I've heard him. I've heard him on Rogan. I've heard him on a number of other places. Outside of his gig, and he seems like a pretty grounded guy.
He knows how to play it really well. He's been incredibly loyal. He sent me a text 3 weeks ago, giving me much. I'll show the text after this, which was really, really cool on a Saturday morning, thanking me for helping him.
Cool. And, that's the great story, man.
Great story, and he doesning need me. Trust me. But he stays connected.
Good. That's good. People shouldn't forget where they
he doesn't.
started.
He's very philanthropic. But when I tell you, he's making hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah. No, he's in the stratosphere right now.
And it's nice to hear that they're a great guy. So
and
I'm happy about that.
And like I said, the interviews that I've heard him do, he's a really well-grounded guy and stuff. And he's just. He didn't let it all get to his head.
Yeah, when I did that thing in Vegas, I did a concept in Vegas in 2013. He helped me on that one. He helped promote it, which was great. And then when I did Flavored Nation, which was the celebration of the iconic foods of that was the cherry on the sundae for me, Flavored Nation, where I came up with this concept of celebrating each one of the 50 states has an iconic food.
Okay, so you're doing the 50 states. That must have been a bear to manage, though.
Yeah.
I mean, just trying to find the locations, trying to find the chefs, trying to find the food.
I thought the idea, there was a lot, it was for me the end of the career.
Right.
Like this was going to be it, right? And, after I did the food university at Caesar's Palace, I had this idea. So it was like 2013, I had the idea. And I took it I formed a thing with Joe, and we pitched it to Houston, and we pitched it to Tampa, and they almost bought it, and the deals fell through. And I said, I knew I had something. So the concept was it was very important for me to do a show without celebrity chefs because I now believed that food is the star. I believe we had progressed culturally to the point where it now superseded food. Everybody you spoke to was a food expert, be it a 20-year-old girl from wherever to an 80-year-old guy. Everybody believed they were a food critic because food had, in our culture, had morphed into the stratosphere. So I believed I could do a food event tied to that. So the concept of that event was I would call it Flavor Nation, own the property, and celebrate the iconic food of each of the 50 states. And each of the 50 states has 2, 3, or 4 iconic foods relevant to just them. And then I would hold a social media thing, a social media promotion to decide which food would be the iconic food. It would be decided because I would, in 6 months in advance, before I even announced the tour. And I didn't realize how popular it would become. Everybody has an opinion. If I said to you, what's the iconic food of New York, what would you say?
Pizza.
You would. I might have said pastrami. But you need one food to represent the whole state.
Okay.
You know what it ended up being?
No.
Buffalo wings.
You're kidding
Buffalo
me.
wings are more popular.
Really?
Buffalo wings. If I said to you, if you're from Jersey, there's an obvious one for Jersey, pork roll in Jersey. Right?
Yeah.
Pork roll, which is also known as Taylor ham.
Okay.
It's a Jersey thing. Massachusetts was clam chowder. Louisiana was gumbo. So there was a determination. It took a long time.
Yeah, I can see
to
that.
figure it out. And then we had to fly the best people in that state in to do it.
Because each region and each state is different, like you said, buffalo wings. But, you know, if you go down to Philadelphia, it's a cheesesteak. You know, the best cheesesteak in Philadelphia.
Yeah, there you go.
You know, I mean.
It's cheesecake. It's key lime pie in Florida.
Right.
It's so if I said to you, what is it in New Mexico?
You know, soft crab in Maryland, you know.
Close, but I guess it was crab in New Maryland. I guess
Soft crab,
yeah.
You know, I was never a big eater but my brother loved it. And it would be a mess. I mean, he'd just stand there for hours and break open these crabs for this little bit of, I'm like, man, I'd be eating a steak. I'm like, what? That just doesn't seem worth it to me.
This was the coolest.
This is great. You know?
To me, this was the best idea I ever had. I loved the name, Flavor Nation. And then I formed a relationship with the people who own USA Today. It's a company called Gatehouse. And I was able to bring it forth in 2018. And then after one event, they bought the whole thing.
Wow.
But
was that your last venture?
That was my last food venture.
Okay.
That was 2018. And then I figured by 2019, I figured one on top of that.
Okay.
That was even bigger.
All right.
But
so
I
tell
never
me
got
about
to do
that.
it. All right. So we learned that we drew 6,400 people to an event I never did called Flavor Nation in Columbus. It was a massive success. And I said, wow, I couldn't believe how. And we got a lot of press, like Yelp covered us. And so I had this idea at the time of doing Foods of the World, because I thought people could come together with the iconic foods of the world and tap into you culturally as well as curiosity. So I felt we could eat your way around the world in one day under one roof.
Wow.
I gave it a name called Global Palate. And
the landscape is changing, like you just mentioned. Yelp, the whole landscape is moving
changed.
Right underneath your feet here.
Right,
you know, so you're
right.
trying to balance that all out too.
Yeah, there's a few things going on. I wanted to go out with a bang,
right?
But then the pandemic hit, and
wow.
So we were close. We had a deal with a real estate company in Jersey. Matt Cali, if you've ever seen.
Matt Cali. I'm very familiar with Matt Cali.
Matt Cali was
being in the
partner.
Cleaning business.
All right. If
you know somebody over there, I can always
hold
talk
on
to
a
them.
second. I had sold them on being our partner, and I was going to bring it forth. And then on March 12th, 2020, I got the email that said we're freezing any purchases on events. And then the pandemic happened and changed everything for me. So I was older then, and you know, I was concerned where events were going to lie, and thinking events would come
especially
back.
with people coming together and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I mean, that was, you know, it was a time that everybody was just crazy. That nobody knew where. I mean, I belonged to a business group in the county, and we would be sitting at the table looking at each other, going, "Okay, well, what's the next move?" And we didn't have anything. In my case, it worked out because we were very busy. So, you know, it worked out for me because I was backfilling hospitals and doing all that stuff. So, you know, but 90% of the businesses that we're in that group were severely
And
hurt.
I'd been through the recession, like that really kicked my butt.
But this was so
something bigger.
sudden. This was like there was no time to prepare for it. There was no. It was like, okay, we'll set these rules up, and you don't have any choice. This is it. It was sudden. Business guys are usually 6 months down the road, 10 months down the road, a year from now, this is where I'm going to be. That was like unheard of. You didn't have the time to do any of it, and it took a lot of guys out of their game.
No, it took me out of. It destroyed me.
Yeah.
It destroyed me. But I was still like the bomber that was hit and that lost 3 engines and had one little engine left, and I kept struggling to figure it out, and it was such a great thing. And then there came a point where I started thinking about, okay, maybe this is over now, and which it's in my DNA. And I started, I had to do something,
So is that when you went to Rockland
Well,
Works?
what happened was I started thinking I said, all right, maybe I should start giving back. And I thought it's a hard thing for me to do because I was in a business that was the coldest business on the planet.
No, I know.
And I never quite liked it.
And you had to survive that way to survive.
Right. But truthfully, Rockland County, I loved living here. I raised my family here in New City. I have 2 great kids who came out of the school system here, who are doing great. And I said, all right, maybe I could give back to Rockland County in some way. And, I saw this ad. I had never looked at an ad. Because I was always an entrepreneur, since 1985. And I saw this thing called Rockland Works. I said, what do they do? And I learned about what they did, which was amazing. I didn't know Rockland Works is the career center of Rockland County, which helps people skill up and get jobs. And I called them up because they had this business thing open, this business job open. And I realized in talking to the person who was the director that there was no business mind that existed in Rockland County, in Rockland Works. It was all like social work,
right?
Educators,
which is a different field altogether.
Completely, but they needed a conduit to the businesses of Rockland who spoke business. And I said, you guys don't have that. I have that. So I met with them and ended up working there, and never thinking I would last more than a month.
Well, I know you enjoy it. I know you're enthusiastic about it, and I think it's a great place. I mean, I was there with you. You bring a ton of experience to a place that that needs that experience, especially when you're talking to people that are going to go into the workforce. But tell me a little more about Rockland Works and how it works, because it's a kind of a secret.
I didn't know about it. I lived here for 35 years.
Too. Right? I got to be honest with you.
I didn't know it.
Howard Hellman, shout out to Howard Hellman. He was the one that brought it to me, and then he introduced me to you. And I'm like, Howard, I said, I don't know the first thing about Rockland. I said, I've lived here all my life. And he goes, well, you wouldn't know about it because you're too busy doing what you're doing.
I didn't know about it because I came and went. My wife was a stay-at-home mom. She soaked up Rockland, but we never knew it. And Rockland Works is a career center that was set up to serve the underserved. It was set up to serve the underserved, help skill them up, get them job ready for free, all free, through workshops, resume writing, all that stuff, and then turn them on to businesses, And the interesting thing, the challenge for Rockland Works doesn't only lie in getting people jobs. Businesses are critically impacted since the pandemic because the shift in employment culturally has changed. So kids are coming out and they're not able to retain staff. So if businesses don't get staffed up in Rockland County, they go away. Right.
They can't survive.
They can't survive. And I realized, wait a second, this is something I could help support. So I started going out and meeting people like yourself and Howard, who I met early on, and other business
Howard knows
leaders.
Everybody, by the way.
Howard knows everybody, but there are a lot of people who didn't know Rockland Works, and I became like a Pied Piper of Rockland Works. And I absolutely love it because it fulfills me in a way that I was never fulfilled before. I never felt this. It's
funny because I work with a lot of young entrepreneurs, in a lot of different situations, and I never knew it was there. And we have a program called Level Up where, they get together and talk about all their situations, their problems, and, whether it's insurance or manpower or cash flow. And it's all, just a replica of the group that, all the old guys now just a replica of that group. And I never even knew that exists, because that would have been a great resource for me. And I'm going to use that in the future as a great resource, because I do have a lot of guys that are coming out of recovery that are, that are 30, 40 years old. They think, oh, I'm too old to do this. How am I going to get a job? So it's good to know those resources exist. You're right in Nyack.
We're right in Nyack.
The old high school.
But we're not serving just the underserved. It's became, since the pandemic.
Right.
And since ageism, specifically because of the perception that you don't have computer skills, so you don't get hired. People come in there. I remember sitting with this is a true story, but my first year there, I sat with a CEO of a semiconductor business, about 70 years old, who still wanted to work and nobody was hiring him. And he needed help. I said, you were the CEO of a semiconductor business.
It's amazing how many people, and I'm one of them, I got to be honest with you. I've been asked, many times. I'm probably the same age you, and they're all.
I'm 25.
Yeah, I know.
It's good to see you. Look good.
So, people constantly, oh, when are you going to retire? I just give the blatant answer: I'm never going to retire. My wife knows that.
I'll never retire. I want my mind to work.
So, but there's a lot of people that do want to be active and be and have a purpose every day to get up and go to work. And it doesn't matter what age it is. And it's a great organization. I had a great time over there meeting all the people.
And the people who work there are so passionate about what they do.
I'm sure we're going to be working together in the future along those lines.
Looking forward to
it. So, and I knew this was going to be a great podcast, and I really want to thank you for showing up and giving us a great story.
Really good example of you meet somebody, and here we are.
And I'm a true believer in that. That's what this podcast is about.
It's very cool.
It's about getting away from automatically thinking what you know about that person and actually finding out about them. And you'd be amazed about how special people are that you don't even know about.
This is a great county, and it's got so much potential. And, it's great to impact it like we do, so it's a cool thing, man. I'm happy to know you.
Yep, and we'll be working together.
You got a deal, man.
Thank you for coming. I appreciate it.